Hello, everyone, and welcome to a PTH Expert Mentor Series workshop on understanding the US investor mindset, getting ready for a US fundraise, presented by the amazing Maria Pienaar. Maria, welcome. Maria is a multifaceted professional, excelling as a board director, investor, and product leader known for fostering innovation and growth in diverse sectors. Her key strengths lie in building environments that facilitate the accelerated growth of early-stage startups within the ecosystem, including creating new accelerator frameworks and fostering investor relationships. Notably, Maria was pivotal in establishing a successful Finnish accelerator program, resulting in 55 Finnish companies entering the US market and achieving substantial growth within the first 6 years of the program. Maria is an operating partner with Unicorn Growth Capital, investing in early-stage fintech companies, and founding principal for First Principles, a US funding and market entry advisory. She also serves as a fractional chief operating officer and CTO for Femmar Health Corp, a women's health tech company. Before this, she co-founded Blue Label Ventures, a corporate VC focusing on investments in digital health, IoT, cybersecurity, fintech, including insurance tech, and enterprise IT services. She's also served as a CIO at Celsi, a market-disrupting mobile carrier. She's held a lot of leadership roles in business development, product management, and marketing at Finnode, the Finnish government accelerator in Silicon Valley, at Lucent, Nokia, Vodafone, Globalstar, and various startups. She's worked in many international markets, including the US, South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, and the UK. Maria, I'm going to hand over to you. I know this workshop is in the best of hands, so let's have a great interactive discussion, everyone. Thank you, Maria. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Omar. Let me share my screen. So as we said, today we will just have a conversation around investor mindset. Now, I do want to just premise this as well a little bit with regards to, you know, when myself and my Finnish colleague worked on the accelerator program here, also with the Finnish companies, it was really our desire, the benchmark for fundraising and the most competitive market is really to be able to compete effectively in the US market. And what we found as well is once you're able to appeal to a US investor mindset, that will serve you well and make you jump up top with doesn't matter which country investors you are talking to. So for us, it was quite key to set a benchmark that we want you to be able to play for, as I say, my favorite team in the Premier League is Man United. Don't know what yours is. But to be able to play for a Premier League soccer team like that, you just have to be top of your game. And especially now is a very tough environment for raising funds. So hopefully this will give you some views on how moving forward. A bit more about my background. I grew up in South Africa. This is my favorite animal in the wild. And as Omar said, you know, I've launched 20 or 30 global products and services myself. I had a wonderful privilege to be able to work in a lot of different operating roles, which now that understanding also serves me well in the advisory work that I do. So let's talk about the investor mindset. Now, I know at least two of you mentioned that you're busy with a raise, and I think what would be interesting to hear from those who are busy raising is what are some of the, where are you in the raise, what stage of raise are you in, and what are some of the challenges that you keep on facing in either opening doors with investors or during conversations with investors? Russell? If you don't mind unmuting yourself.
So
you're right, Russell.
Actually, it might be a good idea to also hear from Khalid. Khalid is just joined. He just closed a small angel round for his startup. And then actually everyone here is fundraising.
Oh, good.
except for except for perhaps Amar, who's still, who's going back to Wharton. He's fundraising for that too, though.
Yeah.
So everyone here is fundraising at some level. Zishan is fundraising, I know for a fact. The other Zishan is also fundraising. So please, guys, share your experiences.
Yeah,
Okay.
Russell, you were busy talking, but you're on mute still.
Okay. So
Hello,
with
Mr. Kumar.
Russell, go ahead.
Hello.
Fine. Okay, sorry.
Let's
go
have
ahead.
Russell go first and then Khalid, if you don't mind.
You want me to continue, yeah?
Yes. No, let's have Russell go first and then you can go.
Okay. Right, thank you. I didn't mention and apologize to Omar that earlier with our venture we're starting in Dubai, that Omar is our equity partner and also advisor. Which we're very proud of. It's a big honor to have his guidance. And basically, my son is the founder, and so he is the how do you say, the main voice of the area of raising the capital. Maybe Omar can touch on that subject later. Joshua is not able to be on at the moment. He might be able to join soon. But on the status of it's very early stage at the moment, so we're just basically getting into conversation with some investors.
Great, thank you. And then Khalid.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Maria, for letting me talk. So, as I'm the founder and CEO of one of venture related to education technology, it was a little bit challenging while I'm trying to raise the investment, but the idea that I had since the beginning is to finish the development of the product and looking after that for an investment just to scale up and go in. Especially we are having international team and we are trying to collaborate with multi-institution in more than 25 countries. Recently, we raised a funding. It is around $500,000 for market development fund. And also we get a support to be able to give a scholarship to some student, which is around $1,000 for any student sign up from Paramount student. And we are thinking this is a very good initiative to scale up with the company. But the main challenge that I'm facing now, when I raised this funding, we didn't raise funding for working capital. So we are having many members working with us, more than 100, and that is most of them, they are voluntary, and we are seeking for working capital to keep the stability of team. So that is the main challenge that I'm facing. Maybe if, I don't know if I answered
No, thank you. And if everyone in chat who's raising also in chat can just type in, what some of the challenges are in getting a meeting with an investor and whether you find it hard or easy. But again, looking at the investors only have one thing in mind, and that is about making a return on investment. Just to give you an example with Unicorn Growth Capital, I mean, we've got at least 600 companies in the pipeline to look at and more coming in. But we can only invest in a limited number of companies every single year. And obviously with investors also depend on the size of the fund. They are limited to the number of companies they can choose. So we always assess companies on which company is going to give us a better return on investment versus another company. And the way that investors make money is basically on exit of the company. And I just want to make one comment about exits as well. And exit doesn't necessarily mean you selling the company or you listing an IPO, which may take time. Early investors may exit their shares on the cap table in a follow-on round. So, and that's also an exit. But you've just got to be very clear when you talk about investors that you need to keep the conversation focused on that you are the best company that's going to be able to give them a return on investment over a certain period in time. Now, the first thing, especially for early stage companies that we look at, is the founders and team, and even later stage companies. We're looking at teams that's very, very astute in their domain expertise and experience on delivering and executing on their milestones. And unfortunately, when you look at pitch decks, this is the most neglected slide and an afterthought that gets pitched in. But this is the most important aspect because we're banking on you as the founders and the business. The second aspect that we assess companies on is obviously the opportunity. And this is basically looking at, is the size of the problem for your customers that you're solving a sizable problem that can scale and grow revenues for you as a company as fast as you can, and about disrupting that market as fast as you can. Now, disruption could be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a technology. Now, in some aspects, yes, the technology can be disruptive, but disruption in some cases could also be a business model that's helping you to grow faster and gain scale faster than anyone else. The third aspect we're looking at is a value proposition. Now, this is where, I mean, if I look at all the pitch decks coming in, this is the one that is the least clear a lot of the time. If there's confusion about who the customer is, what problem you're solving for them, and what's your painkiller or your unique solution on how you address that problem for the customer, that's what's causing a lot of investors not to even have a meeting with you. And when we do, myself and my other business associates with First Principles, a lot of the time when we do advisory work around investor readiness, this is one of the areas where we spend most of the time in, because your whole business strategy also is linked and tied quite closely to the value proposition. And Omar, I loved how you positioned the moto vest to say that it's saving lives. So I mean, the tagline clearly that can start with that one is saving 500,000 bikers' lives by giving them an air cushion or airbag. That immediately brings you into a very intriguing, oh, tell me more. A good value proposition always poses the question, tell me more. A bad value proposition always poses a question of, so what? You know, I've heard this 1,000 times. So we'll cover that a little bit later. Traction and growth is important. Now, for early stage companies, obviously where the pipeline is not clear, we are looking at your assumptions, if those are probable, that will gain you traction in the market, because early growth stage companies normally are in a stage of a product customer fit, and then looking at product market fit where you really can start scaling your services into the market that you're addressing. Obviously, if you're a later stage funding round like Series A, Series B, Series C, this is becoming a lot more important in how you are achieving the traction and growth. The other aspects that we also pay close attention to is your defensibility and moats that you are creating against competitive and the competitive advantage that you have. So again, a moat can be a specific business model. It could be specific IP that you have. It could be that you can go easily into multiple industries and customers that you serve. But this is really, how do you defend yourself from competition to come steal your customers away, and the barrier that you are creating for customers to easily move to competitors. And then, as I say, execution and milestones, this comes back to the founding team, is what is your track record on execution of your strategy and milestones that you've set. And a lot of the time, sometimes you need to pivot the business. And how do you do that when there's turbulent market times, and have that resilience? So do you have well-defined metrics on how you also drive your roadmap, and also the metrics that you have as well from an operational perspective and government's perspective to get the team aligned behind the milestones and execution? And a lot of these things will come out, especially when you go into the due diligence process. Always looking at capital efficiency. Now, the one thing we don't want to do as investors, and now I'm talking about venture-backed investors, is especially if the only ask is just around covering working capital, you are not going to be very attractive. Because if you just spend time and money on salaries and other things around working capital, and there's not enough money for growth, which means you're going to have to go back into another raise to be able to start covering growth. We like to see that you spend the money in growth and not majority in working capital. There is a way to position that, and yes, one understands that you need to bring people in full time. But again, where we see your resource planning is in your cash flow statements, and see if that's in alignment with what the revenues you claim you will be generating. But just hiring more, I mean, so many times we see decks of coming in, a founder that says, oh, I'm going to generate $2 million next year. And when we look at the use of funds, 90% of that is hiring more developers. Now, how can you grow and scale if you're only focusing on developers? That immediately tells me maybe you over designing the product even before you had a clear customer product fit. So these things are sort of little flags that pops up that causes us to ask a lot more questions as we go through. This is another aspect, is the category and industry that you are playing in alignment with my interest as an investor? Does it fit in with my investment thesis? Does it fit in with the type of portfolio companies that I like to invest in? And this is something you just need to look at before you reach out. I cannot tell you how many solicitations I get, which are clearly just LinkedIn spam emails, that because I have the title of investor, that those companies didn't even bother to look to see if we do invest in anything non-fintech. So a lot of those emails coming in is for non-fintech companies. And our investment thesis is pretty clear in the type of companies that we are interested in investing in the stages of companies on our website. So nothing is less attractive than a company that doesn't even bother to do their homework and just doing a blind outreach just because there's an investor there. So do your research and homework when you're looking at the investors you're looking at. And as I say, this is always clear upfront in our mind, is what's your exit potential, because that's how we are making money. And again, just bear in mind, if it's early stage, obviously you don't want to sell your company 2 years in or 3 years in. Just be clear that you have a exit strategy and what the exit potential is for maybe selling the shares on a follow-on round of an early stage investor. As I say, exit doesn't necessarily mean you exit as a company, but in the long run, you have a clear view on how you're going to make money from your company as well, which may be through an M&A or an IPO listing. But just be very clear up front on how you're thinking about exit. You don't necessarily have to do that in the initial pitch. There's little cues and clues that you can add in throughout the pitch that can help give me a view of potential exit, and making money on that. But obviously, this is something that will likely come up in due diligence. So all we're looking at is whether you're building and running a sustainable business and you building credibility to showcase us that you are able to build a scalable business that's going to give us a return on investment. Right. So these are the key things when we look at assessing companies. As again, please feel free to interrupt me at any point of time. Now, if we look at the elements of investor readiness, these are all the aspects you need to be able to address, right? Now, not all this information necessarily needs to be part of the pitch deck, but all this information needs to be in some way or form captured in your data room. And the earlier you start building your data rooms, the easier it's going to be to maintain that and add in additional information as you go along and having a conversation with investors. I think the two key things, especially for early stage, is obviously your legal, all your documentations around corporate governance, legal policies, HR policies, and things like that. The financials is obviously a key one that we look in. Obviously, something to just have your pitch deck, where the pitch deck addresses the value proposition, your competitive landscape, your go-to-market strategy, which gives me the roadmap for product market fit and differentiation. But as long as your FAQs or some type of marketing plans, business development plans cover these aspects in that data room, that shows me a great deal of maturity on why you're a good team to bank on. But we'll cover the data room a little bit later as well. So key goal that you have always in mind is, first of all, getting a conversation with an investor. Second of all, getting into due diligence with that investor, and then getting through due diligence with that investor. And a lot of the time these days, in the past, you used to have to fly out to go and meet investors, in-person meetings. I'm not sure in Middle East what the business culture dynamics, if it's still more in person or not with potential investors in that region. But typically now the initial conversation will be a Zoom call. And then if there's a need then to have follow-up, and if the investor then goes through and say, I want to have follow-up meetings, then they will pull in other team members. Second call, again, maybe a Zoom meeting, and then the rest may be in person. But it's all about building relationships with investors, and you always looking at expanding your investor network and building those relationships. Any questions around some of these topics that we just addressed off, the key things on when we look at benchmarking investors? So let's talk a bit about the pitch. So the only thing the pitch is, and the pitch deck is that just allows you to help creating confidence in your business and in the domain expertise that you have in that industry that you are playing in with an investor. You should theoretically be able to give a 3 to 5 minute pitch without using slides, because it's all about telling your story of your company and really giving me a roadmap how you're going to get to generating the first $1 million of revenue, how you're going to get to generating the $10 million of revenue, and how you're going to generate potentially, if you want to become a unicorn, the next $100 million of revenue with an investor. And again, it depends on the industry that you're in. The timing of how you achieve these milestones is quite key. What we do want to see in it is also your heart and the passion that comes out. I mean, at the end of the day, this is like a baby that you have. When that baby is born, as a proud father, you obviously talk a lot about this baby and the potential of this baby. You see great dreams for the potential that this baby can bring. And when you are doing your pitch, please show us your heart and your passion for that, because that's the thing that's going to get you through turbulent times. It's not the place where you come up, so sometimes we see potential companies in pitch session that I've been at that basically say, hello, my name is Maria. We're a AI SaaS-based platform that basically helps customers save operating costs. And, this is my team. That doesn't excite anyone. Like, I won't invest in you. So it's fine to smile when you tell your story. And this is about the story of your business, why you have a large opportunity and what your strategy is to generate revenues and return on investment for the investor. Now, the pitch deck, it's your 30-second advertisement. These days in investor outreach, your teaser message need to be very clear and concise before you can get, especially if you're doing cold outreaches. And the pitch deck should not be more than about, I would say, if it's high in graphic components, 15 to 19 slides. I would say don't go past 20 slides. These days, design is very important. So it is quite key to brand your slides. If you don't have strong creative visual graphics and branding on the slides, just by all means, once your narrative is defined properly, it would be good to just get a bit of a visual designer to help bring concise graphics that support your story. Now, again, if we just look at pitching as well, and this is the other reason why you want concise slides that's not too dense in text. In the physical pitching environment, the way that the message gets conveyed is normally through body language. Then the next way it is conveyed is through the tone of your voice. And then the next way that it gets conveyed is through actually the content on the slides. In the virtual environment, it's all about tone of voice first, then content, and then your body language. Now, you do not want to get that investor distracted by trying to read what's on the slide, because then they lose what you are saying. So it's important that your voice is the key lead, especially in virtual pitching environments, that we can hear your story. The other reason you want to have a very clear and concise value proposition, again, example with Omar, if you give me a story, and people remember stories, right? If you give me a tagline of some generic AI, whatever's the flavor of the month, or blockchain company or SaaS company things, I hear thousands of those. So I cannot remember what you do if I bump into Omar to try and tell you about this exciting company I met. So, and again, Omar, with being able to relay Zishan's, where he had challenges with internet connection, value proposition in a very clear and a concise manner to me as a potential other investor which may invest in that space, it immediately piqued my interest. And I immediately it popped up to say, tell me more. So, and that's why it's important to be able to relay your story in such a way with a powerful tagline that immediately it opens the doors and someone can refer you to someone else because they remember your tagline. Buzzwords, the 3-letter acronyms, always write those out, please, and don't use too many of them. The reason for that is a lot of the time the investor you're talking to may come from a different industry that you are operating in, and the 3-letter acronyms may be similar to your industry from the industries they come from, and it just causes confusion. So use clear language in it, and any detail, you can have an appendix as backup slides, especially in a due diligence process when more questions get asked. Otherwise, leave it in the data room. Right. Common mistakes that we see, the very first one is the value proposition is not clear. And whenever that value proposition is not clear, it just, when I have to listen to pitches, and by 90% in, I still can't figure out who the customer is and what the real problem is, I'm not even going to follow on with conversations, because that to me just means this company is likely just a solution trying for a market or looking for a market to fit. Too much focus on product. So many times I see investor decks where 90% of the deck is all about product. We don't invest in product. The product is obviously the enabler of the problem you're solving for a customer. But we want to understand, as I say, that business narrative of showing me the roadmap, how you grow revenues, the first $1 million market, next $10 million market, next $100 million market, right? Picking up that the founders are not able to execute. Right, and having a very unclear business model on how they make money and who the paying customers is. A lot of the time there's lack of financials and milestones, or the ask is not very clear. Now, when you do look at pitching now, a lot of the time in some public pitching events, even virtual events, like in the US, there's new rules that when you do a recorded public sort of pitching event, that the company should not add their ask in or their financials. But whoever does that event will tell you when they don't want to see the ask or the financials. But obviously with a normal investor, or if it's a smaller closed network of pitches, then obviously you do want to add these slides in. The other thing that we always judge around is if there's, I would say, first a good, for early stage, good product customer fit, that there's a clear view on why there's a burning need for them to buy, and then how you scale that to product market fit, which means now you can scale and your operational frameworks are set up to really scale. And as I say, in due diligence, that's one of the key things that we're focusing as well. And just sometimes there's an overestimation of market share, or market share that companies think they can gain in a certain period in time. Now, just talking a little bit about that, again, early growth stage, it's fine to be a little bit more conservative with the revenues you can generate within the first 1 or 2 years, because you're still structuring things properly. But here in Silicon Valley, when you start then ramping up year 3, 4, 5, we want to see the size of what you think your dream can achieve. And especially for international companies, and even a lot of US-based companies, the mistake I see is they're too conservative in growth. And when we see very conservative growth, it's like, no. We invest in the large size of your dream, what you think you can achieve. So always think about it. If I have the chunk of money that I'm asking for and I'm applying it, what would be possible in growth? And position your deck around that, right? Pitch deck outline. These are the key aspects of the slides that you have to cover in the pitch deck, right? Now, the order of it depends on how you tell your story. If you have an exceptional, strong team with domain expertise and how to grow and scale this type of business in a specific market, you always bring that team slide up to the front just after the value proposition, the problem solution slides. If you have maybe less of an experienced team, you keep it, I would say, a little bit further down in the deck. But again, utilize the flow in the positioning of these different slides of what makes sense in telling your story. And as I say, if you can tell your story in 3 to 5 minutes, and a lot of the time people tell me, oh, it's impossible. No, it's not impossible. If you need to spend more time than that, it means that you giving too much information, and then the investor loses the story, or more questions start popping up. You want to keep them focused on the top three things of why your business is valuable. Now, as I say, the title slide, and again, everywhere you go through the pitch deck, you use the titles in a slide as part of your narrative. The key thing on the title slide is if there's a intriguing hook. Now, again, using the value proposition hook that Omar used with MotoVest is saving up to 1 million lives of motorbike riders in the world through a new airbag system, something like that. You can always play with the words, but immediately that intrigues me to say, I definitely want to learn more about this. So make sure that your value proposition is quite clear in that little 6 or 7 word title slide in your introduction slide. Value proposition is simply a problem slide and a solution slide. Now, the problem slide is key. Sorry, is key on how you basically frame who the customer is, what the problem is, what they've tried to use to solve the problem, why it's not working, and what's the burning need? Why is this an urgent problem for them to solve? And then your solution is basically the value, what's your painkiller and the value that it brings, and how it moves the bar for that customer to solving that problem. Product or service, no more than 1 or 2 slides. This just needs to be a visual representation of what the product does and how it works. So, and don't spend too much time on it. That should be about a 20-second conversation. Then obviously we want to get into the market size, your TAM, SAM, SOM. Now, obviously we want to see that it's a sizable market, this problem exists in, and then a reasonable assessment of that portion of that market you can believe you can capture. Now, go-to-market strategy and traction. I normally like to advise companies to just have a simple business roadmap of traction and market, and that needs to be aligned with a financial timeline, because this way you paint the story of how many more customers you're going to sign up in what time frame. If you have any key customer logos, you put it in there. You put any key metrics in of, lifetime value of customers, repetitive customers buying the product, the contract durations. And then if you start expanding into other countries and markets, just show that in the time lap, and that helps synchronize it back into the market size that you were talking about. Obviously, we want to understand how you make money. So that's your revenue model or your business model. Is the metrics clear on how you make money and how you charge for your services? Then the financials is obviously another one, which I see I actually don't have in here, but that's obviously a very key slide to show me the timeline of, your revenues and your revenue growth and what you can targeting. And again, when you do that slide, just keep it simple. And as I say, build that out from your cash flows, and also build that out from, if I had this chunk of money, what would be possible for me to achieve? Management team, we had a conversation about, so you really need to demonstrate the expertise of the team, and then obviously your capital requirements and your ask. So these are the 10 key things. Just the value proposition building blocks. As I say, there's the problem one. It's who's got the pain. You've got to tie up the paying customer right up front for me in the introduction of this. Why do they have the pain, and what's the impact of their pain on their business? And what have they tried that is not working for them? And then your solution is just, what's your unique painkiller to solve that problem, and what's the benefits to the customer, i.e., savings in operational cost, being able to generate revenues faster, whatever the key business metrics is on how that problem helps solve them to become either more effective as a company or to open new markets for them. Be very clear about that. And this is the place to use data. Generic is not your best friend. So please don't be generic. If you have data points, bring it in, because that builds great credibility with an investor. It tells me that you know your market. It tells me that you've done your homework in the market and you've got clear metrics on how you define growth for that. And as I say, a lot of issues with a value proposition statement that's not clear. I don't know who the customer is. I don't really know what the problem is that you're solving. This is the place that we spend, and also with some of the work I do with companies when I advise them on their value prop, on their investment strategy. This is the area where we spend most of the time in, and this is the one that you also need to go test with either existing customers or with investors to see if it resonates. So, as I say, typically make sure that you understand the value proposition is clear and by all means test it. This I cannot talk enough about. Now, this is just an example of key roles. So what we want to see around team is the 3 or 4 key executives in roles that are the key success roles that will drive this company forward, right? And depending on what type of industry you're in, the key titles and roles of the executives may change. If you are a serial entrepreneur, I want to understand that you are a serial entrepreneur. If you have had any exits, this is where you want to do it. You want to demonstrate the collective expertise and experience of this team to make this company the best company in the industry you're playing in. So do bring in a little bit of experience and the scale of businesses that companies have done, that these executives bring to the table to be able to help this company grow and scale. Just a quick thing around CTOs. Again, what we like to see in a CTO is that they're able to build scalable platforms and scalable tech teams and manage them effectively in remote, because normally your tech teams will be either a combination of in-house and outsourced services. So again, what's the experience that the team brings to the table, and highlight that. So if there's key company logos, again, that showcases where the team has picked up the experience, just show 1 or 2 key brand logos where that is applicable. But this is in essence one of your most important slides to do that. So showcase your expertise as a founding team on why you are the right team to invest in. Competition, just want to talk a little bit about the competition slide. So again, a lot of the time we see companies just putting a feature functionality matrix index. That's the worst way of trying to showcase competitive differentiation. We are very interested to understand how you as a business competes against the business of your competitors in the market. The reason why feature functional slides don't work is I'm a new company in the market, and I may claim that I have 6 features that you as a company that's established in the market and have a $5 million R&D budget has only 4 features. Now, they can spend that money to very quickly catch up with me. So that doesn't really tell me anything. A lot of the time, companies use 2x2 grids, and yes, they always put yourself at the top right. This, in a way, does help tell a story, but it's not, again, a very effective model for me to showcase competition. And a lot of the time, it can also just be overdone. So again, when slides become too dense, immediately what I try to do is figure out what's happening on the slide, and I lose the story that you're trying to tell me. The model I advise companies to use is called the petal diagram, and Slack is a very good one for me to use examples. So if you go to Google Images, just type in Slack petal and it will pop up this petal diagram. what I like about this, it can give you an ability to tell your strategic view of the competitive landscapes, right? And how you as a company differentiate in that. And this is where also you bring in little hints of competitive logos, which potentially can become potential acquirers, but you're doing it in a soft way. So very simply, the type of story Slack would have told when they were launching the company is that, you know, all the different communication and project management tools is very fragmented, which makes it very hard for project teams and product teams to collaborate around the product itself, around the different topics for the product, because information is fragmented all across the organization in different places. And that increases the timeline in which new products and services get deployed by more than 80% of the time. So what we at Slack do is we provided a single environment integrating different aspects around task management, synchronous and asynchronous communications, bringing in where the file sharing comes in and information sits in a very concise way that teams can collaborate around themes very effectively, increasing productivity and minimizing timelines for deployment of new products and services by 80%. So we don't need to build a file sharing. Dropbox or Box are two of our key distributions that's been enabling us to gain market share in this industry by more than 30% growth year on year or month on month. So this is a way that you can say it shows, first of all, the fragmentation. It shows how you bring together the fragmentation. And it gives me an ability to tell the story of how I, as a business, so it showcases to the investor quite effectively that you understand the competitive landscape. Obviously, you've identified some of them, and you are showcasing to me your unique differentiator of how you bring this fragmented landscape together that solves a real problem for a customer. And that's what I like about the Slack model, because it allows you to tell that story about the competitive landscape. Use of finances and proceeds. Again, nothing is more attractive to an investor than a founder that knows the numbers and the data. And that's why it's so key. Glad to see that there's a financial modeling person in the group that helps tell the strategic financial story that is in alignment, again, with your go-to-market strategy and your market acquisition, and has that all lined up. So it's all about your operational finances, your capital efficiencies. And I say, again, yes, you do need working capital, but we don't want to see that that's the biggest chunk of the investment we're giving you, because we're not giving you money just to spend in salaries. We're giving you money for growth. Again, keep it very simple, this slide. Simply just bar graphs of revenue growth. Now, obviously, this is an example of way too slow growth, right? Key milestones, just put the revenue numbers for that year on the bar on top, and give me the top 2 or 3 financial KPIs on how you measure success. Now, some areas you can put in a line for break even here when you're thinking about breaking even, but always plan the revenue growth based on when you think a funding round comes in of a certain value on what it will help you achieve. So if you're now asking for a $2 million round, I mean, I obviously want to see much more aggressive growth in numbers than this. Tell me that story of $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. If you're very early stage, pre-seed, seed type stage company, by all means, don't do more than 3 years forecast if you can, because obviously your pipeline is not quite there yet. But if you're more established companies, we want to see a 5-year forecast and build this up from the ground up from your cash flow. And what we want to see also for early growth stage is, yes, we know the revenue numbers may not be correct. But what we want to see is that there's probable and defensible assumptions that you make in those revenue numbers. Ask and proceed, it's very simple again, just put the amount of money that you are putting down. You don't need to tell me what, you don't need to name the round, right? Because round naming, it's a very confusing thing, and you know, people name rounds different things. There's no sort of industry standard around that. And then obviously if you put maybe the terms in of what the round is that you're looking at. So if there's minimum investments, do put that down, amounts. And then just give me a very simple breakdown of the key categories and how you're going to spend the money, right? And then just things like salaries and stuff, just put it as G&A, your working capital. And I want to see that as maybe the smallest bucket in this. And then other key thing in the ask slide is, please tell me, so basically if that money is going to last you 18 months, just say in the next 18 months, this will help me achieve then the top 3 business milestones, i.e. signing up 60 more enterprise customers, doubling the revenue, or quadrupling the revenue, whatever the top 3 key milestones are, put it in the ask slide. Now, also just talking a little bit about competitive landscapes. Now, I've noticed that depending on some of the countries some companies come from, they always love to talk about valuations of their competitors. Personally, I would advise against that. Because when you start doing that, you basically, remember, investors, we've got large databases of information we use. We can look up those valuations. But if you start talking about valuations of a potential competitor, you might intrigue me more to look at investing in your competitor. I don't need to hear from you what the valuations are. I mean, that's not serving you at all. So I would advise against starting to talk about valuations of competitors specifically for that reason, because it just can bring in more red flags and questions on why you are not an investable company. And in a way, when you have a conversation with an investor, we are looking at coming up all sorts of reasons why not to invest in you. So don't start adding in confusion in your slide or contradicting statements that will distract us to now raising more questions around that. Always in your 3 to 5 minute pitch, just keep the investor very much focused around your top 3 goals around each one of the slides that you are talking about, that there's a consistency throughout the deck on why you're a valuable company and team to invest in. Before we go into the actual fundraising process, any questions around any of these aspects of the pitch? As I said again, guys, please feel free. Some of the information you may have heard already. All right, so let's talk about the actual raise itself. Right. And again, this may differ in some markets. It does take time. Raising a fund does take time. Now, if you're looking at the statistics, the numbers are stacked against you. Now, in the US, and I think it's similar numbers that I've seen in Africa and in Europe, typically less than 1% of companies are able to close around, after 3 years of existence already that they've bootstrapped themselves, are able to close around with a high net worth individual / angel. Less than 1%. VC-backed companies, less than 0.5% of companies get funding or get funded by VCs. And this is even more the reason why you just have to be on top of your game and present yourself in the best way, starting with your pitch deck. Right. If you have a very strong network of investors that you've already cultivated, a raise can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And especially if you're doing follow-on rounds, obviously you have previous investors that may take on those follow-on rounds and open the doors for you to other investors. If you're first-time founder, it can take 12 months. So this is just something that you need to plan for basically as you go along. And you also need to plan for the different stages of raises that you're looking at, because even though you're busy with the raise now, you need to think about how do you generate value for the next raise that you are looking at. And I mean, especially last year when valuations took up to a 50% dip in the market, a lot of companies were forced to take down rounds, which is never a good thing to do. So you just have to have a clear strategy, and always also state that you really need to budget for it, because you are going to need legal advice. If you are not skilled in term sheets with investors, please hire a good contract lawyer that has done investment term sheets across different markets. They can save you tons of money in the future. I mean, I've seen so many times, and I cannot tell you how sad that is always to me, some startups which actually lost their companies in bad deals with investors. Right, just because they didn't have an understanding of term sheets and they didn't bother to hire lawyers for that. And in some cases where they had to clean up cap tables of bad investments in previous rounds, which cost them even more money. The other one, if you do want money from US investors, more than 80% of US investors will only invest in you if you have a Delaware structure. And a lot of it has to do with tax incentives. So there again, you need a good either financial company advisory or legal advisory that understands global tax laws, so that you can establish, if you need to establish entities in other companies, especially around shareholding, that you set those corporate structures up right up front. Make sure your cap tables are clean when you go into a next round, because if there's some aspect in the cap table not being clean, starting to talk to an investor, it just delays the process. And if that becomes too cumbersome to clean up that cap table, because that sometimes also costs money, buying out other shareholders, it just becomes an impediment. So just make sure those things are done. As I say, your key goal is getting the meeting, getting into and getting through due diligence. So in a way, this is the final exam for your startup, right? Strategic execution is, really, do you have a defensible ask? Are your assumptions probable? And have you got any data points that give me confidence that you understand the metrics that will drive your company forward? And that's why I say, if you have data points, which now all of you have, please bring them into the pitch deck, right? Do you understand that specific investor's needs? Obviously, be clear about what you are getting and willing to give up. And I would, if you can avoid it, don't get into a raise if you are desperate for money, because that can always make you compromise and get into a very bad deal with an investor. Preferably have more than one investor on your cap table, because if you just have a single investor, that can cause a lot of challenges. I've seen in the past as well, companies that had a single investor, and then the senior partner of that investment firm, who were very supportive to this company, basically passed away. The new partner that took over that company became very hostile to this company because they had other agendas of a potential hostile takeover. And, it turned into a very, very ugly mess, which the company nearly had to shut down. But luckily they were able to get out of that. So just always bear in mind, things can happen. And also with your team, make always sure that you display that there's business continuity management along the way, that if anything happens to any of the key executive team members, that the company can go forward, which is also a key reason investors don't like to invest in solo founders, because it's too much risk. So if you are a solo founder, build yourself a strong executive team around you with expertise that can continue with the business should something happen to you, and that these executives have a vested interest in either equity or other means in driving the company forward. You're always in a position where you building the network. And that's why that little tagline of yours is so important, you know, with the female health company that I'm involved in, whenever, you know, because here in Silicon Valley, you never know who you meet in the street or who you bumped into the elevator or at a networking event. So when someone asks you what you do, just use that tagline. It's like, well, we help save lives from motorcycle accidents. You know, we decrease the mortality, and even if you put some data points, we decrease the mortality rate of motorcycle accidents by 80% through our motor vest. Now, if you just do a little tagline like that, immediately it's going to say, oh, tell me more. Sorry, I don't have time to talk, but here's my card and number. Please reach out to me. And every time you do that, it immediately pops up. And obviously, if there's more time to have a conversation, you can tell them a bit more. That's why I say you always need to be prepared to give a 1-minute pitch, a 3-minute pitch, your 30-second tagline, and that opens the doors. So your job is to always look at building a network of investors, because the stronger that network is, the shorter your time frame of a raise would be. And also with investors, even if they say they're not interested, always ask if there's a possibility for them to introduce you to someone else after you've had obviously extensive conversations with them. Remember, the investor network is a very closed, trusted network. We don't like to refer companies in an ad hoc manner unless we understand it's a good deal. And then also understand the preferences. But investors that also say they or maybe they're too early for you, or you're too early for them, just ask if you can send them updates, maybe once a quarter. So always just keep them updated of what's happening. It's a long-term relationship that you're building, and you never know when that investor may come back into the mold for you. So just be diligent around that. Now, investor outreach, as I say, especially if you're doing cold outreaches these days, is quite challenging. It's quite noisy. You really need to control the process all along the way. You need to come up with between 150 and 200 names of investors you may want to reach out to, and obviously do all the research around if these investors fit in investment thesis, fit in the profile of the investors that you're looking at. Now, a lot of the time I also hear, oh, we only want to work with strategic investors. That for me is a bit of a myth. A strategic investor doesn't really exist. The only reason you may get good support from an investor is if you as a founder, once you've assigned if you got an investor, is having conversations with the investor of how they can help open doors. We are quite happy to open doors. We are quite happy to bring our expertise in specific areas to help advise you, if you bother to ask. Because obviously we have a vested interest to see that you are growing and scaling as a company. A lot of the time, and I've seen a number of outsourcing companies that claim that they will do this investor outreach for you, obviously for a certain success fee, right? The challenge that I have with that is you have zero visibility who they're talking to. You don't even know whether they are using your messaging in their outreaches. And yeah, sometimes they may open a door and then you get involved, but it's a and I've also seen a lot of the times that things go south very quickly because there's an expectation to get meetings set up, and sometimes meetings don't get set up. So just make sure that you're in control of the list. So if you do want to work with outsourcing companies, they need to come into you managing the list and be quite transparent about who's being reached out to. And if they want to add some of the investors in that list and contacts, then they need to do that. Right. So as I say, you might reach out to 150 to 200 investors, and 2 to 3 may invest in you. So it's just a numbers game. And again, your job is to building and maintaining investor relationships. So even investors that's not interested in you, always have a conversation of seeing how you can keep them updated, right? These are all the aspects that need to be in your data room. And that's why I say the earlier you can start creating a data room, the better. Now, some aspects in your data room may have maybe a bit more confidential. So make sure that the folders in which you put information in, if it's more confidential information, make sure you have control or you have access to that. Some investors, if you ask them when you get to the due diligence process where they want access to the data room, ask them if they, since you are going to expose confidential information, if they are okay with an NDA. They will tell you, yes, they're okay with it, or they will tell you, no, sorry, I cannot sign NDA. In a lot of cases, investors cannot sign NDAs because they work with so many, they have conversations with so many diverse companies. That's when you, as a founder, need to make a call whether you want to continue with a conversation with that investor or not. Because if you try to enforce an NDA on them, they're just going to close the door on you if they're not prepared to sign one. The amount of information that you have in your data room obviously also depends on the stage of growth your company is in. So for early growth stage companies, the key aspect is obviously all your legal information, all your financials, your deck, your FAQ document, your marketing strategy and plan, your tech stack, your sales pipeline, obviously product roadmap, in any HR policies you may or may not have. Obviously cyber is important. Do you have cyber policies and stuff? So all sort of policy or any research information, just add that in the information you have in specific folders. But these are all the things that you need to cover. And from a company governance perspective, as you grow and scale and maybe at some point start adding in a board, just keep on adding to this data room. Just do it from a governance perspective. In any case, I know there's tons of platforms available out there which allows you to structure your data rooms. Legal and regulatory. Now, some of you may have specific legal certification that you need. I know insurance industry, financial industry, I'm sure there's in the mining side certain things around safety rules. Just make sure that you have those certifications or be able to talk about timelines on when you will get those certifications in the market that you operate in. Corporate structures, again, here, I advise the earlier you can work with a legal firm to help you define this, to define your cap tables, to define your terms for term sheets, to have a clear strategy on, as I say, what you are willing to negotiate around and what you're not. Make sure that these things are all clean and clear in your whole strategy and in your data rooms. And again, remember, when you start getting into term sheet negotiation, everything is negotiable. As long as you can defend why you're not willing to accept a specific term of a company. And just rights of first refusal is a big challenge, I think, for you as a company that could prevent you and lock you out in future rounds. So always keep in mind a next round and how you set the strategy. Also, that will enable the next round for you, right? Corporate governance. Now, I can't talk enough about this. We do care about corporate governance. So the first one we care a lot about is financial governance. The second one we care a lot about, as I say, is business continuity, policies and procedures. Cyber governance is becoming extremely important, especially if you're in financial services. And there could be a timeline on when you will structure a board. An investor that comes in may require you to structure a board because they may want board seats. And make sure that also if you have external directors on the board, start identifying the board members that can help you open doors that add value to growth for your company. And start identifying and having conversations with them very early on. If you are not seasoned in manage a board member, all countries have a board of directors organization that does training around that. So I highly recommend that you take that training because it will help you as a CEO manage a board very effectively and how to structure that. Also then depending on the corporate rules and laws of the country that you operate in. Board of advisors. Now, this doesn't need to be a formal board as long as you have other advisors, and especially if you're a weaker team that hasn't got the experience that some of you may have. There it's important on the team slide to show you maybe 2-3 advisors that you're working with that's advising you on how to avoid key mistakes in how you're driving acquisition, but always the people who serve on that board, whether it's advisors or not, need to be able to give you access and open doors to customers and potential investors as well. IP, now this is if you have patents, in some cases you may not have patents, but if you have patents, again, make sure you work with legal advisors on how to build and maintain and manage that portfolio. A lot of the time there's a timing on when you're filing these patents, but this could be a very great moat and defense for your company, especially when you look at potential acquisitions. So again, just work with the appropriate people who understand patent laws and also in different markets, because you may need to file in different markets. Now, risk. Just make sure you've got some type of risk register in your data room as well that clearly showcases that you understand what the potential risks are of your company and how you mitigate that, and make sure you always keep that. That also just shows good governance. Now, fortunately, as male founders, investors don't get into too many risk questions with you. Female founders, unfortunately, this is an area where they get grilled more than their male counterparts. But as I say, just understand that you have that. And again, business continuity management is also one of the risks you need to know how to mitigate. And talk about how you have business continuity management, even from a very early stage startup, because that is the highest risk. If something happens to key people, what happens then? We had a lot of conversation about exit. Just make clear and sure that you have an exit strategy and that what that is. And again, for early stage investors, what's the strategy to allow them to have an exit off the cap table as you start growing and scaling the company, and they may or may not want to participate in later rounds. So in summary, this is really, for me, key is have a fundraising strategy and don't just look at the current round. Look at how this raise also impact or potentially impact future rounds. Your key focus is to keep on building value, and that is through revenue growth for it. And as I say, you are going to need to spend money on professional services, especially legal and financial. So make sure that you have a budget available for that, because that will cost you money. It may sound like a lot of money upfront, but it can save you tons of money in the long run to help you avoid bad mistake. And just practice as many of your time, your pitches, practice it with friendly investors, participate in some online pitching events and get feedback. Now, yes, you can get a bit of, investor feedback whiplash, we call it, because you can sometimes get what seems contradictory advice. Just be sensible about it and take the advice that you feel benefits your company the best, and take it there. But yeah, keep it simple, clear graphics, and just know, and especially if you don't have a strong investment network, it takes a bit longer now than normal. And also understand the different investment vehicles available to you in your country. In some cases, depending on your type of company, there may be other investment vehicles available to basically fund working capital. If you have a strong sales pipeline, there's invoice-based financing options that may be available, which is normal loans, debt, right? And again, there it helps to work with a financial advisor in the market that understands all these different financing mechanisms on how you can grow and scale your company. Right, so that hopefully gave you some good aspects around all the things we look at as investors when we go through the process. And as I say, I know you are in different stages of growth and experience in raising funds. But are there any specific aspects that you may have questions around or want to discuss further? We've got some time for a couple questions.
That was amazing. Thank you, Maria. Yes, Samar, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the for the presentation. I think there was a lot that we all can kind of take away. I did want to pick at a couple of things that just stood out to me. I want to hear your input on a few things. In particular, how do you think the fundraising strategy now is different for people at different stages of the fundraising process? So in this, or rather, raising for pre-seed versus Series A, and compared to what it used to be. How is that kind of transitioned, and how do you expect it to change again when maybe a year, 2 years from now things are kind of normalized in terms of interest rates and whatnot?
Yes, so I think what I've seen, because valuations have been down so much. Now, the one category in which valuations are now popping back up again is obviously anything to do with the AI category, right? But because valuations are down so much, it basically, what I've seen is companies take smaller rounds to start with. Can just mute that. So they're taking smaller rounds in order to not be penalized in potentially taking a down round in evaluation for the next round. So I've seen that. I've also seen an increase in debt equity financing, where you don't give away that much equity. So it's really, I think, applying some of the different financing vehicle mechanisms out there in different way, but just normal equity rounds, I've definitely seen the preference is to take smaller amounts and then go back into a raise, maybe towards, in the next 8 to 9 months, because there is a bit of an expectation that things will start bouncing back. So it's really just a timing aspect, and if you can hold out a bit longer, not going into a raise, by all means prepare for the raise. Is hold that as long as you can, because as I say, and I am not sure in the Middle East, and especially Saudi, I know there's a lot of new funds and investments that opened up there. Just understand what's happening in that funding space in that market as well, and the mechanisms available, and adjust your strategy according to that.
Sure, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, it is unfortunately more an investor-friendly environment than a startup friendly environment. You know, that fear of missing out, which we've seen, especially with Fintech and previous rounds 2 years ago, that's not there yet. The other thing to bear in mind as well is when you start having conversations, one of the key questions to ask up front, especially if you haven't got a lead investor yet, is if an investor leads or follows. Because if they follow, they will not be very committed until you say, okay, I've got a lead investor, and then can come back to them. Also understand how much dry powder they have left in the fund. Now, say if a fund period is 10 years, typically, and they in year 8 of the fund, that means they will be a lot slower in making decisions because they've already employed the majority of the cash into portfolio companies. If the fund is in the first year or 2 of the fund, then that's actually a good place. Then they'll be more hungry to deploy cash. So always ask the questions around, you know, do they lead or follow? It does take time to get the first lead investor, but once you've got that lead investor, it makes it a lot easier to get the rest. And that lead investor may also refer you to other investors in their network. And also the timing it takes for due diligence process, and from the time that you get the term sheet, how long contract negotiation takes for the share purchase agreement.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Maria, thank you so much for the valuable insight. Would love to have a copy of the presentation to go over it again and look at this recording again. But in your experience as an investor and you know, being an experienced hand in this, what's your number one go for, like, flag when you want to invest in a company, and your number one red flag of when you don't want to invest in a company?
Unclear value proposition. It's my number one flag. The number 2 flag is when I see contradiction between cash deployment and you know, the finances and the market strategy growth, which brings a lot of the time also points to a lack of ability to execute. And as I say, you know, with unicorn growth, we invest both in pre-seed and seed and through Series A rounds, especially for pre-seed founders that may be first-time founders. The important thing for us there is, have they surrounded themselves with the right expertise to guide them into becoming successful? And if they haven't, and there hasn't really been a lot of experience, then, you know, that would be a no. But it's just really how you position yourself that you're able to execute. But the first thing is the lack of clear value proposition, because that shows me you don't understand your market. You likely haven't proven initial customer market fit. You don't understand how your solution may be shifting for customers, and that's why they use those data points as much as you can. Investor deck is not where you do generic marketing, and yeah, by all means keep the marketing people far away from your investor deck, please, because they focus on market. They not focus on the story about your business for investors.
So for the flip side of this argument is that if there was a solid value proposition, that you would take interest into getting to know the story further, because you talked a lot about the investor's story as it stands out, and the team, obviously, but at that core, the founder. So if the value proposition is solid, then obviously you would want to know further, right?
Yeah, and that's why I say again, if the value proposition is solid and you use data points, it immediately tells me that you have certain expertise and you understand the market that you operate in. As I remember, the first people we invest in is you as a founding team, right? So, but as you tell your business story, it tells me, it builds that credibility that you are a strong founding team. And everything hangs off your value proposition. And then how you attack customer acquisition and showcasing that you're able to execute. So it's very important. That's why I say your go-to-market strategy, show it as a business timeline. That shows me execution of milestones and timelines that you've set for yourself and able to achieve. And that's how you position yourself as a very, very strong team. And as I say, yeah, financials, we look at if there's any contradictions in financials and resource planning with go-to-market revenue predictions. If the assumptions are not probable, we likely will ask, but at that stage, you're getting into fairly detail in due diligence, where you can then, be able to answer the questions in better ways. And again, showcase. So I say founders that know their numbers and their data points are the ones that become very attractive, even if it's first-time founders.
Nice.
And as I say, along the way, that proves us as well whether you have a potential product market fit or not. And customer references, if you have those, very strong ones, just add a slide in on what a customer has to say, why they're so excited about you. I mean, I'll give you an example just before we go into another question. One of the companies that I worked with, right, they were generating a couple of $1 million in their first year. And when I looked at their pitch deck, and one of their challenges is the investor said, oh, you're too distracted, you don't know where your focus is. And that was a really clear example of a very poor, unclear value proposition. And I eventually asked this founder, I'm like, well, why do customers buy from you? To which the response was, I don't know. I said, maybe you should go ask them, because once we know that answer, then we can refine the value proposition. And the minute we refined the value proposition, we were able, and it took a couple months on testing it with customers as well. And the minute we got that clarity, immediately it took away the questions from potential investor conversation. I mean, this founder had very strong investor relationships. So it immediately took away the confusion that this is just like a platform looking for a market, and immediately positioned him in a very strong way they fit in and across multiple industry segments. So it took that away. And because that helped generate an even stronger sales pipeline, decided not to go into a raise rut at the moment. And I've seen another example with a founder that I worked with that was in the UK, where again the value proposition kept on positioning in the wrong space, and investors were, well, this is not really an attractive opportunity for us. The minute we pivoted the value proposition to what it really was, they more than doubled their revenue in the first year, and also again decided not to do the raise. I think they took a small convertible loan note. But again, a strong value proposition doesn't really work with investors only, it works with your customers too.
Nice.
Amar, I think, had a question.
Amar, did you have a question?
Oh, Joshua has a question.
Joshua has a question. Go for it, Josh.
I'm happy to go ahead. Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for your time today. Really do appreciate it. You've probably seen me pop in and pop out. I've been driving and I've been covered in rain. I'm in the UK at the moment, so I do apologize. Hence why I don't have my camera on. My hair's a bit all over the place, but I do really appreciate your time, and hopefully I haven't missed any points. I will go back to the recording to double check the whole conversation, as what I have caught has been very insightful. I just wanted to kind of really ask, because I know you guys are quite derived towards the Web3 sector, and we've recently been building a project that is Web3 related with a very strong proposition. I just wanted to get kind of your general feeling on the current sentiment around, Web3 investors or investments, and particularly in the US. The only reason I'm asking this question in particular, the business that we are building will be based in the Middle East, and we've mostly been exploring, Middle Eastern investment and European. But we think based on, general knowledge and particular experienced investors in the Web3 blockchain sector, we're probably more derived and we should probably target more US companies. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of get an understanding how you guys currently feel about the industry itself, particularly with artificial intelligence coming up, being the new hype. A lot of VCs and companies focus their attention towards that, and some things get left behind. So yeah, it is just a bit of a general question, but I'd be very keen on getting some insight from yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Web3 in itself is, as I say, still in its infant stages. Where the industry is now. I mean, we invest in Web3 fintech companies in Africa. Blockchain is a very key enabling technology. Now, obviously, not everything needs to be on a blockchain, but what we're seeing with Web3 now, Web3 also will drive the next generation of the internet. So there's still a lot of infrastructure investments that's going in Web3. It's not that the category has disappeared. I mean, in the US, the fluff around cryptocurrency, what I call crypto exchange thing, yeah, I never believed that, and we also never believed that was really the main driver of things, but the infrastructure aspect of what Web3 enables. So we're starting to see, and especially in Africa, I think is a little bit more advanced, a lot more infrastructure aspects on how Web3 capability, blockchain capability is being used. I mean, at the moment, there's over 100 blockchain protocols out there.
Wow.
I can't remember. I keep on losing count. It is still an industry that's starting, I think, getting into the next pivot, but infrastructure investment in Web3 is still where a lot of it is, and we will see more tokenization of things happening. And yes, obviously AI is a current. I mean, remember the AI industry started in 1956. Generative AI, which is the hype at the moment. I mean, we all know as investors that investment in that will disappear within the next year. Deep learning and infrastructure for AI is really where a lot of investments are going. So for AI, we're not looking at companies that are building more tools on top of the open AIs and all the other. We're looking at companies of applying it. And it's the same. If you're a fintech company and you need to apply blockchain, how do you apply the capability to drive scale for you? And in a way, it becomes an embedded part of your company. And I mean, just talking about AI, I'm a lot of times I'm like, okay, you're an early stage startup. You claim you're an AI company. How many users and data have you got? No, we don't have any. Well, how can you apply AI if there's no data? So that's why I say don't focus in investor conversations around technology. I mean, the technology is important that you use it to scale. And as I say, if there are applications for why you put things on a blockchain, that's the key thing. But the key thing to focus on is the problem for the customer. You as a business are solving, how you solving it better than anyone else in the market, and how you gain market share faster than anyone. Keep the focus on first $1 million, next $10 million, next $100 million story. And don't get stuck on tech. And a lot of the times, especially here in Silicon Valley, in AI and blockchain, you have guys who were involved in defining these industries. And if you go down a tech space, I've seen investors tear a founder apart because they know more about the tech than the founder does. So don't get into the trap about talking about tech.
That's great. Thanks, Maria. No, I was just curious to get your insights. We tend to keep on top of our research and our market research to understand what's happening. And I'm very happy that you mentioned the element of tokenization, because that's where the future of blockchain is able to adapt into our day-to-day. And there's a lot of big talks around that. That's what our projects specify and they're specializing in.
Yeah, and as I say, the infrastructure part, there's still large infrastructure pieces missing. So all our investors, we still focus on you building the rails, and about 80% of our companies use some type of blockchain.
Yeah.
Rails, other 20%, the application is the blockchain doesn't make sense to use it. So anywhere where there's some type of smart contract where tokenization is essential to help take the friction out of the problem is where it's key.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maria.
You're welcome. Right, I think we have time for one last question.
Any more? Tahir Saab, Atiq Saab, Mushtaq, any thoughts, comments? If not, I don't want to put pressure on you guys. It's pretty late here. Tahir Saab, do you have a question?
I just want to make a comment that it's been amazing and absolutely fantastic learning for me. I spent 43 years in insurance, but how to make a good pitch and how to make a good deck and what the investor is looking for. We've talked to so many VCs, as you know, Omar, and we have talked to so many angel investors, and we've always thought that we made a great presentation. I felt that the body language was fine. I had a good story to tell. I had the good numbers to convince them that where the market is and how we will tap them. But somehow or the other, the things are just not materializing. Now, once I go through this entire presentation again, with your help, I'll get the presentation, and I'm pretty sure that there were certain loopholes which were escaping us.
Yeah.
We need
No, I mean,
to. Yeah.
And I'm more than happy, Omar, if there's a couple of people who just want to have a quick review on the deck, we can do it in a Zoom session. I normally spend about 30 minutes on that. I'll give you my honest feedback. Is the only thing I promise is honest feedback. You may not like the feedback, but and that hopefully can help you just refine some of the gaps which you may have in your story. So yeah.
I think that would be absolutely invaluable, Maria. So you and I will set that up, and then we'll basically do it as a private pitching feedback session, and we'll get some of these gentlemen to come back and get in line to for the sword. So
yeah, and Atiq, you're on mute. You're on mute, Atiq. We can't hear you.
Is that okay now?
There we go.
Yeah, okay. One question from my side. I recall that during the early part of the presentation, you were of the view that we should have a list of at least 100 to 150 investors to touch. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. You're going to have to, especially now, KISS. I mean, again, if you already have a strong network of investors to reach out to, then maybe you don't need that many. But if you haven't got a strong network of investors, I would say in any case, build up a list of 150 to 200 investors in any case. And again, when you're looking at introductions, look at the portfolio companies. Investors love portfolio companies they've invested in to refer other portfolio companies to them, because there is some vetting process there already. Strong founders know other strong founders. And the second warmest introduction is obviously through an investor. But yeah, please don't, if you just bump into investor at networking events, ask them to introduce you to other investors. I mean, again, it's a very, very trusted network. And we will not refer deals unless we ourselves have done some type of due diligence on it. And then just look at who's got that strong, but again, have a good teaser email ready, and make sure everyone who does introductions just use the same information.
Okay, thank you.
So just on that, we had a session yesterday. There was a panel that I moderated, where one of the founders, Dr. Sara, who is the founder of Sehat Kahani, which is a health tech here in Pakistan, she said something that really stuck in my mind after the session. She said, we had done 200 investor calls and we were getting 0 results. And then one of our mentors said, okay, so you've done 200, but now your next number is 800. And she was like, wait, what? And I thought that, 200 was the magic number. He said, well, 0 for 200 means you need to widen your net. You need to find different investors. And the minute she got that perspective, she just said, oh, so we're only 25% of the way done.
Yeah.
As opposed to oh my God, no one's ever going to invest in us.
But I think, yeah, and that's why I say you just have to, it's a numbers game. But again, with speaking to 200, so great for them to be able to have the conversation with 200 investors. But then again, I think there needs to be a bit of an assessment of what of this story is preventing them. And I'll use again this UK customer I worked with, because we were very quick to identify just from initial 5 investor conversations, and some of them soft testing conversations, that the category in how they positioned their pitch was not going to work. And the minute we were able to pivot that pitch with the 6th investor, suddenly the doors opened up in the conversation. So they still with like that, there might be some slight things around the value proposition or go to market or anything and it's good to ask investors why. But yeah,
so
and it is expanding.
They were quite early on in the Pakistani ecosystem. There wasn't a lot of support available to them.
Yeah.
So they were kind of feeling their way through the process, but then they went on and raised $500,000. Then they raised $1 million, and then they raised $2.7 million. So they are considered a success story in Pakistan, female founder led. You know, they've really done a good job of positioning themselves. But if they'd had help, if they'd had a seminar like this, or, you know, advisors like Maria to maybe guide them early on, it may be that 200 would have been enough.
Yeah, and I mean, also remember, female founders, the odds are just stacked against them. So less than 2% of investment goes into female founders, and I'm sure in some markets it's even less. So, but yeah, great stuff for them. But there again is a good example. They brought down the round.
Yes, they did.
Get the door in, and then performed on that round.
So they actually did 3 rounds. They did a pre-seed, they did a seed, and then they did a Series A.
Okay.
So they've done well. They've done well.
That's good.
Maria, thank you so much for what has really been a masterclass in fundraising, especially from a US context. I know I speak for all the members of the PTH community in thanking you for taking the time. And I'm looking forward to scheduling a feedback session on pitch decks for those people who are looking for feedback. And I would imagine that would be all of them. So you might need slightly more than 30 minutes, or maybe we can do it over a series of sessions rather than trying to jam everything into one session.
Yeah.
But once again, thank you so much for taking the time. We truly, deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You most welcome, and it was lovely to meet everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Maria. Maria, have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.